Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels said, "You can't change the masses. They will always be the same, dumb, gluttonous, and forgetful." This has become the mantra of the Trump cabal. Over the past 3 decades, Fox News and the Republican Party have turned this quote into a lifestyle, creating an entire disinformation universe where everyone believes outrageous lies after being gaslit into paranoid delusion. Former Soviet Prime Minister Nikita Khrushchev allegedly said in 1959, "We don't have to invade the United States. We will destroy you from within." Now, granted, I just read a fact check stating that he can't prove he said that. But the fact of the matter remains that it's really fucking happening in real time as we speak. It's Nazi o'clock. Time to woke up.
The following moments may contain explicit language. Viewer discretion is advised.
According to Andrew E. Kramer from the New York Times, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy of Ukraine appealed to the Trump cabal on Wednesday to respect the truth and avoid disinformation in discussing the war that began with a Russian invasion of his country. Quote, "I would like to have more truth with the Trump team," President Zelenskyy told reporters in Kyiv during a broader discussion about the cabal, which this week opened peace talks with Russia that excluded Ukraine. President Zelenskyy said that the U.S. president was living in a disinformation space and in a circle of disinformation. The remarks delivered from his presidential office in Kyiv, a building still fortified with sandbags to avoid blasts from Russian missiles, were some of the most pointed yet about Trump and his views on the war. President Zelenskyy had until this week walked a fine line of staking out Ukrainian positions while avoiding any suggestion of an open breach with the United States, Ukraine's most important ally in the now nearly 3-year-old war. After the initial ceasefire talks between Russia and the United States, President Zelenskyy on Tuesday had starkly laid out his refusal to accept terms negotiated without Ukrainian participation. Later Tuesday, Trump said to the Ukraine's leadership and the war that you should have never started it, and appeared to embrace what has been a Russian demand that Ukraine hold elections before some stages of talks. Elections were suspended under martial law after Russia's invasion in February 22. According to Barack Ravid with Axios, the Trump cabal's abrupt shift in U.S. policy towards Russia, coupled with his verbal attack on his Ukrainian counterpart, have increased the tension between Washington and Kyiv to its highest point in years. Trump's comments, falsely suggesting Ukraine started the war and that Zelenskyy is deeply unpopular with his own people, will supercharge fears among Ukraine and U.S. allies that the Trump cabal is siding with Moscow ahead of possible peace talks. They could also increase the tension and suspicion between Trump cabal and the Zelenskyy government. Senior U.S. and Russian officials met on Tuesday in Saudi Arabia for more than 4 hours to discuss ending the war in Ukraine and preparing for a meeting between Trump and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Both Russian and U.S. officials who participated in the meeting said publicly it was positive and successful. The talks were very good, Magalardo said later from Mar-a-Lago. Trump said he is much more confident about the chances of getting a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine after the meeting in Saudi Arabia, and that he thinks he could meet with Putin before the end of February. Zelenskyy, however, said on Tuesday that the talks in Saudi Arabia were organized behind Ukraine's back. "We were not involved in the meeting between the U.S. and Russia and Saudi Arabia. It was a surprise for us, and we learned about it from the media," he said. In protest of the meeting, Zelenskyy decided to postpone his unrelated visit to Saudi Arabia, planned for Wednesday, in order not to create a false impression of negotiations. Trump said he is disappointed with the complaints from Ukrainian officials who said they were not invited to the meeting in Saudi Arabia. Quote, they had a seat at the table for 3 years, Trump said, adding the Ukrainian government could have settled its conflict with Russia by now. Quote, when they are worried about not being seated, they could have made a deal long ago, he said. Trump weighed in on Ukraine's domestic politics and noted there have not been elections in the country because the government imposed martial law. The leader in Ukraine is down at 4% approval ratings. Wouldn't the people of Ukraine need to have an election? Ukraine is being wiped out, Trump said. Recent polls in Ukraine show Zelensky's approval ratings are around 50%. Trump added, quote, you should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I like him personally, but it is the leadership that allowed the war to go on. Trump's occasional comments suggesting Ukraine was somehow responsible for Russia's invasion have been a source of concern and consternation for Ukraine's other Western partners. Trump has not made similar criticisms of Putin or of Russia's authoritarian political system. You know why? Because we surrendered to the Russians when we elected this piece of shit. Trump has never criticized Putin. Trump stood on stage next to Putin in Helsinki and denounced U.S. intelligence because Putin said he didn't interfere with the 2016 election. Trump said nothing when Russia invaded Ukraine. Trump said nothing when Putin supplied his soldiers with Viagra to rape Ukrainian women. Trump said nothing when Putin bombed civilian shelters and maternity wards. Trump said nothing when Alexei Navalny died. He pulled this shit in Afghanistan with the Doha Agreement and then capitalized on the sabotage withdrawal, still spewing the lie to this day. Trump's capitulation to Putin may be far more sinister. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Ukraine is winning this war. For every dead Ukrainian, there are 5 dead Russian soldiers. People think Russia is the other side of the world's problem because maps are usually printed horizontally between the poles. However, if you look at the world from true north, you'll see that Canada and Greenland are the only territories in the way from us becoming part of the new Soviet Union. Now that they're not talking about border walls anymore, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump wants to realize Sarah Palin's bridge to nowhere instead. Trump is supposed to be our bitch, not Putin's. But we're in the Axis now. According to Amanda Marcotte of Salon, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Make America Healthy Again motto is meant to convey he is sincerely interested in helping Americans avoid getting sick in the first place. During his Senate confirmation hearing for Health and Human Services Secretary, all Kennedy and his newfound Republican supporters could talk about was how in love he is with prevention. Quote, we should be moving to value-based care, which includes prevention, Kennedy confidently declared. The committee chair, Senator Mike Crapo, described Kennedy as passionate about preventing and managing chronic disease, improving health outcomes, and reducing health costs. It should have always been self-evident that Kennedy is not pro-prevention, since he built his career as a vaccine denialist. Yet much of the press seems to have been snookered. So it's especially noteworthy that Kennedy kicked off his new role with a broad attack on drugs people use to prevent depression, diabetes, and other such conditions. On Thursday, President Donald Trump signed an executive order that echoes Kennedy's lie that he wants to make America healthy again. HHS is ordered to assess the prevalence of and threat posed by the prescription of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, stimulants, and weight loss drugs. But it's clear from the context that no good faith assessment is intended, as the order repeatedly cites a preordained conclusion that there is an overutilization of medication and an over-reliance on medication and treatments. Kennedy has long had it out for these drugs and repeatedly argues that the only prevention most people need is better willpower. Kennedy occasionally tosses a red herring about environmental causes, but mostly he frames the issue as a matter of personal failing, focusing on people's diets and exercise habits as the root causes of nearly all illnesses. He regards antidepressants as an addictive drug, falsely claiming that people have a much worse time getting off SSRIs than they have getting off heroin. Instead of letting people have drugs that keep them healthy, Kennedy's solution looks very much like punishing them for their perceived personal failures by putting people into labor camps, which he euphemistically calls wellness farms. As Mother Jones reported in July, people would be regulated to these farms where they would be denied their prescription medications. They would also be barred from having cell phones, computers, or other means to contact the outside world. They would be put into work full-time, presumably for little or no pay, growing organic food. He claims this process would reparent supposedly broken people, again framing mental health issues as not a medical issue, but a personal failure. The racism underlying this vision of labor camps isn't just vibes either. Kennedy has explicitly argued that black kids need to get reparented, ideally in a rural area where they are denied most contact with family and friends. Treating black youth by making them do unpaid agricultural work isn't exactly subtle as far as racist fantasies go. According to Carrie Butler at Mother Jones, in a virtual event last July that was billed as a Latino town hall, then presidential candidate and anti-vaccine activist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. unveiled his plan to overhaul addiction treatment programs. Speaking during a live recording of the Latino Capitalist podcast, Kennedy described opioid, antidepressant, and ADHD addicts receiving treatment on tax-free wellness farms where they would spend as much as 3 or 4 years growing organic produce. On the farms, he said residents would grow their own organic food, which would help them recover from addiction because a lot of behavioral issues are food related. A lot of the illnesses are food related. The idea that addiction is connected to consuming non-organic food is not backed by robust science, but it's in line with many other unfounded claims that Kennedy has made in the past about pesticides and non-organic food causing chronic disease, behavioral problems, and autism. Cell phones and other screens, he said, would be prohibited. We're going to reparent people and restore connection to the community, he promised. We have a whole generation of kids who are dispossessed. They're alienated, they're marginalized, their suicide rates are exploding. The second largest killer for young people is drug addiction. Kennedy has suggested in the past that 5G cell phone technology could cause health problems. So if this sounds like complete dumb shit idiocy, that's because it is. And it's what you voted for. Donald Trump has always been a complete dumb shit idiot who stole his America First slogan from the Ku Klux Klan. None of this should be any surprise whatsoever. We were warned. You could have read Fahrenheit 451, 1984, or the Book of Revelation. Or you could have just watched the old Roddy Piper movie, They Live. And you don't need magic sunglasses to see this shit anymore. They're shoving it down our throats while telling us literally that they own us. What are you going to do about it? Wait till you can vote again? And let me remind you before you bend over, half of the world's lube supply is locked up as evidence for the Diddy trial. So lubeflation is a real thing. I want to make you aware of one of the Nazi propaganda schemes that the delusion-driven right-wing media deploy to deceive the masses. What they do is they write slanted, provocative headlines, hoping that you don't read the article to find out that it's just mundane, commonplace, nothing to be clutching your pearls over. Today on Google News, I saw quote, a list of United States citizens getting double Social Security payments in February from Totodiska. And another headline that said, second round of February Social Security payments goes out in one day from the Washington Examiner. Washington Examiner is a fucking right-wing tabloid shit rag. So according to Abraham Quiros Viaba at Totodiska, apart from the retirement payment, there is also the SSI payment, as well as the SNAP food benefit payment. Although this type of payment is different, and we're not going to take that into account right now. If you have accepted the Social Security retirement check and also get the supplemental Social Security income benefit payment in the coming weeks, you could receive 2 SSA checks. So both the headlines are meant to reinforce the propagandic narrative that there's some massive waste and fraud going on at Social Security and the system needs to be overhauled or dismantled entirely. The president told Sean Hannity on Fox last night that we won't touch Social Security unless there's fraud involved. And last week, Trump and Elon Musk eliminated USAID over a lie about buying condoms for Hamas. And then Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt added more wood to the fire, claiming that U.S. paid for all sorts of exaggeratedly frivolous DEI and LGBTQ events that were actually paid for by the State Department. Despite the lies being fact-checked and confirmed, USAID is still fucking gone. So if you speak the truth, you're always right. Do svidaniya.